Good evening, everyone, and good morning and a Chag Sameach. We are very fortunate at the Fifth Avenue Synagogue to have as a friend to our community, Rav Aharon Kahn Shlita. Rav Kahn is a Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elchanan Yeshiva University and Rav of Knesset based Avigdor in Brooklyn. And Rav Kahn has been teaching Torah for many, many decades to scores of Talmidim. He's an outstanding Talmud Chacham, Torah scholar, who has a wealth of wisdom to offer us. And recently, practice has developed in which he addresses our community at various times during the year, connected to the Yom Tovim, the holidays. And tonight, we once again have an opportunity to hear from Rav Kahn, a privilege, and he's going to speak about the topic of Hoshana Rabbah, which begins tonight and tomorrow, an important day in the Jewish calendar. And thank God we have the opportunity to have some insights about the meaning of this day from a true Torah scholar. Thank you, Rav Kahn.
It's my biggest pleasure. And, my relationship to the Fifth Avenue Synagogue goes back many, many decades. Actually, to the time when Rabbi Shulman was the Rav. He should be well, and developed a great yedidus with Chazon Malavani, soll sein gesund and stark, and whom I understand is almost 5 decades in the shul. There's something extraordinary about Hoshana Rabbah. The name itself is actually extraordinary, but Hoshana Rabbah seems to appeal, if you will, to almost every level of the Jewish intellect, every level of the Jewish Masorah. It begins in the Gemara and continues in the works of the Kabbalah and continues until today, the various halachos and psukim that are relevant. It seems that there is something about Hoshana Rabbah that attracts people because it is at the same time an exciting and very, very concrete expression. You go around with the lulav and esrog 7 times, and you beat the arava, and there are all kinds, and there's a seuda in the sukkah that's special, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, the symbolism and the almost unlimited esoterica that Hoshana Rabbah has to offer, and particularly its connection to a day of judgment, whether it's because B'chag nidonim al hamoyim, on the Yom Tov of Sukkot, they are, where the world is being judged concerning their supply of water and the ability to water their crops and live and survive, or because it's the final moment actually of Yom Kippur's Kapara. Whatever it is, there's so much going on in terms of the actions and in terms of the philosophies and in terms of the esoterics that Hoshana Rabbah, we could speak about it for days. There's one particular nekuda, one particular aspect that fascinates me personally, and that is the relationship of Hoshana Rabbah to the very important midah, the very important character trait of anova, of humility. Humility. Everyone knows the famous chazal, the famous medrash, that speaks about the 4 different minim, the lulav, the esrog, the hadas, and the arava, the willow, as representing different kinds of Jews, different Jewish types in terms of their relationship to Hashem, their relationship to Torah, their relationship to mitzvahs. And the first, of course, is the esrog. Now, the esrog has a taste and it has a fragrance. And that, the Chazal already explained, is the tzaddik. And the next is the lulav. The lulav has the tamar, the date, which of course has a taste, but it doesn't have any fragrance. And then there is the hadas, which is the exact opposite. It has a fragrance, but it has no taste. And then there is the arava. What is the arava? The arava, we might add the word nebach, doesn't have a fragrance and it doesn't have a taste. And these represent all the Jews. The Jews have Torah and mitzvahs. The Jews have Torah and mitzvahs and not Torah, and the Jews who don't have anything at all. They're somehow helpless and lost, and there doesn't seem to be any value to them or any hope for them. And nevertheless, when we take the minim, the three minim are together, and the esrog has to be held adjacent to the lulav, and without that, there is no mitzvah of lulav. If you take 3 out of 4, you are not going to fulfill a commandment. You're not going to fulfill a commandment. It has to be all 4 together. In the idea behind it, all of Klal Yisrael as one is critical and necessary. Every single Jew has a purpose. Every single Jew has a value. Sometimes the value is there and obvious, and everybody is praising that person and giving that person the respect that is due. And sometimes the person doesn't seem to have anything special to offer and doesn't warrant respect, doesn't seem to command respect. And nevertheless, in Yiddishkeit, without that person, the 3 minim are alone and separate, and apart from that, you don't have the mitzvah of lulav. So the lulav is the ultimate collective of Klal Yisrael, representing the ultimate and perfect unity that is necessary for Klal Yisrael to reach out to Hashem on these glorious and critical days. So we think of the arava as being, in a certain sense, a kind of second-class citizen all week long, because the arava represents that person who is bereft of all of these great advantages and great pluses. He's without Torah, without mitzvahs. So what is he? And yet on Hoshana Rabbah, something incredible happens. Hoshana Rabbah, suddenly the arava takes center stage. Center stage. So you have, according to the minhag, based on the Ari HaKadosh, the holy Ari, that you take exactly 5 aravas, you bind them together in one Hoshana, and you go around with the lulav and esrog, but then you put the lulav down. You put the esrog down, and you pick up the arava. And you pick up the arava, and with that arava, you cry out for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Yeshua with a whole series of Hoshanos, especially asking for water. Now, the arava is a remarkable plant because it thrives especially on a great deal of water. The connection between the arava and the water is really fascinating. And I think that symbolically, water and arava go hand in hand, because the arava, as we said before, doesn't have anything to say for itself. It has neither tam nor reach. It doesn't have a taste, nor does it have a smell. And what about mayim? So mayim famously represents humility, also represents Torah. Hoi kol tzamei l'chula mayim. And mayim that represents Torah requires humility. Now, why does water represent humility? Because, as the Rambam makes clear in the very 3rd chapter of Hilchos Talmud Torah, the chapter which he speaks about Keser Torah, the person who is so great in Torah and so committed to Torah that he is defined as possessing the crown of Torah. This crown of Torah, Rabbi say, he says in that same chapter that Torah is compared to water. Just as water goes from a high place by gravity goes down to a low place, so the Torah is not found in its ultimate measure of Keser Torah, of the crown of Torah, except amongst people who have extraordinary humility. So it's very interesting. The arava is humility because it has nothing to offer. How could that person have anything vainglorious about them when they're not? They're simply not. So what is there to be proud of? What is there to be haughty about? What is there to have gaiva for? And then it's associated with water, where even for people who are the crown of Torah, the recommendation and the insistence is it has to come together with humility. So the Arava and the Mayim, they're all so perfectly and totally connected. And that is what we focus on, we concentrate so completely after we put down the lulav and the esrog. You know, Hoshana Rabbah is an extraordinary day because it wears so many hats. It has so many different malbushim. You can ask my dear friend Chazan Malavani. You have a Yom Kippur aspect to Hoshana Rabbah. You have a Chol aspect to Hoshana Rabbah. You have a Yom Tov aspect to Hoshana Rabbah. And everything, by the way, is expressed in the Nusach. Nusach is critical because Nusach isn't simply a nice way of davening or a custom of davening a certain way. Nusach is halacha. Nusach tells you volumes about what it is that you're saying. So you're very fortunate to have a chazan that is a master of Nusach par excellence. You know, it's almost peerless. You have Arava suddenly taking center stage at the very end of the davening of Shachris and Musaf, and with all the Hoshanas. You know, some people have Hoshanas before Kriyas HaTorah, right after Hallel. Some people say Hoshanas after Musaf. Nusach Ashkenaz after Musaf. Doesn't matter. Wherever it is, suddenly put down the lulav. Almost as if what's left in the end, the final analysis, the last word, is that insignificant Arava. That insignificant Arava that doesn't seem to have anything at all. All of a sudden, it becomes central to our focus. And what's especially remarkable about this, is that what do we do with this Arava? What do we do with this Arava? We take the Arava and we beat it on the ground. In fact, very interesting. There are some who say that you have to beat it on terra firma, on Mother Earth. It's not enough to beat it on the floor tiles. In our shul, we go outside and we find a patch of grass and we beat it on the ground. We beat it on the ground. There's something, and you beat it, how many times? 5 times. But you beat it. What are we beating the Arava for? What are we doing? What is that all about? What is its symbolism? So now I'll tell you something very interesting. In the Minhag Ashkenaz, I'm going to digress for a moment from the Arava in order to come back to the Arava. In the Minhag Ashkenaz, we have a kapitel in Tehillim, LeDavid Hashem Oiri V'Yishi. Hashem Oiri V'Yishi. And that kapitel we recite beginning Rosh Chodesh Elul until when? So there are differences of minhag. But the Baal HaTanya and others say that the last day to say LeDavid Hashem Oir V'Yishi is Hoshana Rabbah. You know very well that even though it's called the 8th day, Shmini Atzeres, it is a regel b'fnei atzmai. It has rules and aspects of a separate Yom Tov. And if it wouldn't be for the Sfeika, the Yoma Minhag, we wouldn't eat in the Sukkah at all. And in Eretz Yisrael, it's Simchas Torah already, and it's a completely different holiday. In the Hoshana Rabbah, last moment for LeDavid Hashem Oir V'Yishi, we rely or we find a medrash. A medrash. The medrash says that Oiri is Rosh Hashanah. Yishi is Yom Kippur. What about Sukkos? What's Sukkos? So, if you read a little bit further in LeDavid Hashem Oir V'Yishi, you see a very interesting expression. My light, my salvation. But then it says, Ki yitzpeneni b'sukkoi, he will hide me, he will sequester me, he will protect me in his sukkah, b'yom ra'ah, on a bad day. And that, according to the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch's quotation of the Medrash, is referring to the holiday of Sukkot. In other words, the David Hashem Oyer V'Yishi speaks about Rosh Hashanah. It speaks about Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah, Hashem is our light, with all of the implications of that. Hashem, Yom Kippur is our salvation, with all the implications of that. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu protects us on a bad day, on a difficult day. What is the Yom Ra? Well, we're in Golus every day is a Yom Ra in some way or another. You listen to the news. You want to be a happy person. This is just a personal recommendation. Don't ever listen to the news. Don't listen to the news. You'll be much happier. There's one episode of anti-Semitism, one episode of evil, just sheer evil in almost every direction, from every party, from every corner of the earth. There's just so much evil, so much absurdity, so much emptiness. And we have to live in that. We have to be a nation and a people that still is in Golus. Yes, we have Medinas Yisrael, and we're in Eretz Yisrael, and a very large percentage of Jews are in Eretz Yisrael. But the bottom line is there's a lot of Jews still in Golus too. And even in Eretz Yisrael, it's noch nicht as a poshut. Nicht as a poshut. It's not like we're always sitting on Easy Street and every day there's something else. And I'm not just speaking about COVID. I mean, just the general matzah. We're threatened from within and from without. Gar nicht poshut. That's the kiyut peneni b'sukkah b'yom ra. Sukkah is golus. It's a fascinating thing. There's a medrash that says that even after the kapara of Yom Kippur, if there's any reason why we are guilty of some sin that requires exile, then let Sukkah be that exile. It's a credible exile. It's a beautiful exile. But Sukkah is a substitute for exile. So we come to the day of Hoshana Rabbah, and we have this kiyutz b'nei b'sukkah. Is Hoshana Rabbah represented in L'David Hashem Oyer V'Yishi? So no one says what I'm about to say. I'd like to suggest it. There's something really demanding of understanding and explanation about this very unusual chapter of Tehillim, L'David Hashem Oyer V'Yishi. You know what it is? There's a change of tenor, a change of perspective, a change of attitude that is so blatant and so perceptible, right in the middle, as if a knife came and cut the kapitel in half. The first half is so positive. It's maybe the most positive expression in all of Tehillim. I mean, when you think about it, I'm not afraid of anybody. Mi ira, mi efcha. I'm not afraid of anyone at all. There's no human being that can do me harm because I'm with Hashem. And not only that, there's only one thing on my mind. I want to be connected to Hashem totally. Shivti beveis Hashem kol yemei chayai. Lachzois b'noyam Hashem. I want to sit in the house of God all my life. I want to see the beauty, the pleasantness of Hashem. Couldn't be anything better than that. And it goes up to the point of the Ezbecha ba'ahalo sifchei trua, a shira ba'azamra l'Hashem. I will sing shira. I will say hallel. I will rejoice before Hashem because of all the salvation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has provided me. It's like you're home safe. It's like the Geula has already arrived. It's like David HaMelech doesn't have anything else to worry about. It's the most positive of positive expressions up to that point. And then it's not a new chapter. It's the same chapter. It's just the next verse, the next pasuk. All of a sudden, it's as if in the middle of a cloudless sky and the sun is shining beautifully. And all of a sudden, it's almost pitch dark and the sky is full of threatening clouds and a storm is about to break, and you're looking for shelter, and there are arrows of lightning and thunders clapping around you, and you're scared out of your wits. Scared out of your wits. What happened all of a sudden? Before that, he was with Hashem like this, mamish like this. Unbelievable. like this, like one. And now all of a sudden he says, where are you, Hashem? I can't find you. I don't see you. Everyone has abandoned me. Ki avi v'imi azavuni. And I'm begging Hashem to take me in. What do you mean Hashem should take me in? He's there already. It's incredible. It's mamish incredible. And he says, "Es panecha Hashem avakesh." I am seeking your face. I can't find you, Hashem. I don't see you, Hashem. This is Golus. So before is the Geula, and now is Golus. What's going on? And I personally believe that this is exactly Hoshana Rabbah. An incredible thing. You know, is a Yom Kippur quality in Hoshana Rabbah. It's given so many different expressions. I once wrote a whole article about it. I found 15 or 16 different ways of associating over the centuries. Some minhagim are still with us. Some of them have lost their valence. We don't follow them, or some communities do, and some communities don't. All kinds of things that they used to do that remind us of the Yomim Noraim, of Rosh Hashanah, and particularly of Yom Kippur. And as I mentioned before, as Chazal Malavani will certainly demonstrate to you, there's aspects even in the nigun, in the nusach of a Yom Kippur, the Kedavnik. What's going on? Hoshana Rabbah is part and parcel of a Yom Tov called Sukkos. And Sukkos is Noayisa Ach Sameach Nika Yom Tov. It's a Yom Tov of Simcha Yisera. It's a Yom Tov of Simchas Beis HaShoyeva. It's a Yom Tov where the word Simcha is written large in every aspect of the Yom Tov, and suddenly you come to Yom Kippur Tikazach. Here we say Hallel, don't get me wrong. On Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you don't say Hallel, because Sifrei Chaim and Sifrei Meisim are open. All of these books of judgment, it's not a time to say Hallel. Hoshana Rabbah, you can say Hallel. But as the service wears on, as it continues, we begin to feel the David Hashem Yishi conundrum. We feel that contradiction, that it's gewaldic, it's shein, it's wonderful, it's beautiful. And all of a sudden, things are dark. We're left with the Arava. We have given up the Lulav and the Hadas and the Esrog, the Tzaddik, and we're left alone, naked basically. We have nothing. And then we take the Arava and we beat it. It's incredible. So what's left? Well, let's take a look at what's left in L'David Hashem Oiri Yishi. Kitz B'nei B'Sukkah Yom Rav Seisur Suyyiroi Memeni. No, not anymore. Doesn't say anything of those beautiful phrases. HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifts me up. He makes me great. He puts me on a great pedestal. No, I don't sing any more Shira. I say, Hoshana, help me, save me, save me, save me, save me. Like you saved this one, and like you saved that one, and you Chesed LaAvram, and Yitzchak is Gevura, and Yaakov is Tiferes. It's all very nice. The massive amount of Kabbalistic references. But the bottom line is that I'm left with the Arava, and then, after it's all over, I beat the Arava on the ground. What is the significance of that? So if you look at the L'David Hashem Orev Yishi and you come to its culmination, show me your ways, Hashem. I'm lost. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we can only have trust in you, and we can only have emunah in you, and we can only have hope that things will somehow work out. And there are moments that the first emunah doesn't work. I've said this many, many times. I must have told it to the Olam in the Fifth Avenue as well. My father went through Shiva Maduri Gehenim in the ghetto of Vilna. And after we came out, I was born. And at least that little nucleus, after everybody was wiped out, after everybody was murdered mercilessly, some of them tortured, some of them murdered, men, women, and children to the tens of thousands in the Ponari forest, and just 200 survived in the Vilna ghetto from all of the liquidations, from all the aktsias, as they were called. And they rounded up the Jews and murdered them mercilessly in a forest nearby, in the Ponari forest. And 200 survived. Those 200 included my father and my mother. And I was born. Things were looking up. And my father never ever lost one moment of his emunah. He always had a confidence that Klal Yisrael will prevail, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has never abandoned us. And he conveyed that to us as children, he conveyed it to my children, to his grandchildren, and to his great-grandchildren. At every simcha, at every opportunity, he would constantly talk about it. But I have to tell you something. From Vilna, we went to Lodz. And I was exactly several months old at the moment when my mother crossed the street and she was hit by a trolley and she was killed. Now my father was left after such a churban and after such a rebuilding, a father, a mother, and a child that represents a whole world, the new world, the opportunity to start all over again, and to be smacked in that way, to have such a blow, to be dealt such an unbelievably horrible blow, to lose one's wife and to be left with a baby on your hands with nothing and nobody, not a penny to your name, not a relative to be counted on. And not only did my father not lose his emunah, it grew. I teached at his hesped when he was nifter at the age of 100. Not so long ago. I teached at his hesped pasuk in Mishlei, ish emunos. Emunos in the plural, emunos. Why is emunah in the singular suddenly plural? We don't have several faiths. We have one faith, Baruch Hashem. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So what's emunos? So I said, sometimes you have emunah, but up to a point. If something happens and you start asking questions, Hashem, it's just too much. It doesn't make any sense at all. Can I really believe in such a God? Do I really have faith in you? Do I have confidence in you? Do I have ability to contain and convey that promise that you've given us, that you would never abandon us? Could I give it over to the next generation with fidelity, in truthfulness? Can I be sincere? And my father's answer to all of that was yes and more. I can't fathom it myself, frankly. I was a baby. I didn't go through any of that. But ish emunos. Sometimes a person has an ish, he can be an ish emunah. But ashrei the person who can say about himself that he's an ish emunos, that when emunah number one should have run out, should have petered out, should have simply dissolved in the tragedies, that emunah number two takes over and just lifts him up, 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 way up there somewhere. To a different horizon, to a different understanding, to a different lack of understanding. But trust and faith. And that's ish emunos. I was thinking that the second half, which is full of so much fear in L'David Hashem Oiri V'Yishi, fear, anxiety, a great deal of trembling and just worry. What's going to be? What is going to be with me? All of a sudden it ends. Kavei el Hashem, but that's not the self pasuk. Chazak v'yametz libecha v'kavei el Hashem. That you have to have that extra measure, because the first measure of Kavei el Hashem may not be enough. And that is fascinating. I believe that that is the you might say the slogan, the expression in a few critical words of what Hoshana Rabbah is all about. And it's especially telling that it's, according to the Balatanya and others, as I mentioned before, the last thing you say, L'David Hashem Rishi, from that whole tkufa, from that whole era, that period, from Elul until Hoshana Rabbah. And what's the last thing you say in L'David? Kavel Hashem Chazak v'Yamesudecha. You know why? Because it's very dark. And in the Yontif of Sukkot is embedded a day and a moment where you're left only with the Arava. You're not left with the Esrog. You're not left with the Tzaddik. You're left with the Arava. The simple, helpless Jew who knows that he is nothing. It's very remarkable. And then you beat the Arava. What is the significance of beating the Arava? So there's a famous medrash, and it's also very much in the Kabbalah, in the works of the Kabbalah. And the medrash, in Medrash Tanchuma Parshas Emor, Anu lekachtem lachem bayom harishon, and it mentions all of these four elements: Pri Eitz Hodor, Kapos Tmorim, Anaf Eitz Avos, V'Arvei Nachal. It says that they represent different parts of the human physiognomy, of the human body. What is the lulav? The spine. What is the esrog? The esrog is the heart. Let me read it to you. L'kachtem lachem, zeh she'amar hakosuf, says the Tanchuma, kol atzmosai tomarna Hashem kamocha. Every part of my body will praise Hashem and say, who is like you, Hashem? Yofe Omar David, she'omar ha'apostle kazeh. The Medrash compliments David HaMelech. He says he did right. He's on target when he said, "Kol atzmosai tomarna." When is this moment of Shira, when his entire being is expressing Hashem Kamocha? So, I mean, we could say every time we say Nishmas, we make that point. And we say that pasuk, Hashem Kamocha. But the Medrash takes it in a different direction. It takes it in the symbolism of the human Atzmaisai, which is the Lulav, the Hadas, the Esrog, and the Arava. And it says as follows, Teidalacha, you should know, Shalulav hazeh doime l'shedra shalodam. The lulav is like the spine of a person. The hadas hazeh doime l'einayim. The hadas is like the eyes. The arava doime l'sfasayim. The arava is longer. It tapers, but it's longer, so it's not like the eyes, which are small, like the different petals of the different leaves of the hadas. But it's like the leaves, the petals of the arava, and that is dome lisfasayim, to the lips. That's very, very important for us. And the esrog is like the heart. If we take the idea that the arava are like the lips, I, for one, was immediately thrust into the pasuk in Megillas Eicha. And then later I found it is exactly correct in the words of the Gaonim and the Medrash. In the third parak of Megillas Eicha, the lamentations that we say on Tisha B'Av, the pasuk says, Yitain l'afar pihu ula yesh tikva. He puts his lips, his mouth, his lips to the earth, to the dust, ula yesh tikva. Maybe there is hope. Ibn Ezra on that pasuk says, you know, when a person bows down, there are many different forms of genuflection, many different forms of bowing. You can bend your knees, you can bend over without bending your knees, you can kneel to the ground, you can lean on all fours, on your legs and your hands. Like when you're doing a push-up, you can look like that. Or you could put your head down all the way to the ground, or you could spread yourself out completely, that you're perfectly even with the ground from head to toe, and your mouth is buried in the ground. That's the level of ishtachavoya, says the Ibn Ezra. that a person has to prostrate himself. Ula yesh tikva, maybe then there will be hope. You know what that represents to me? Total hisbatlut, total self-negation. You are nothing. Everything is Hashem. Everything depends on Hashem. It's much more than the sukkah. In the sukkah, we go from the home that we built to a rickety sukkah, a sukkah, a kleina, that you don't even know if it's going to survive. I had a Zayda, Moshe Menachem Spiegel Zechanu Livracha. He was in Switzerland for an operation. When he was very young, he had three little children. He had a wound that didn't heal. He was told to go to Switzerland. He went to Switzerland, and Baruch Hashem, after many operations, the wound was Baruch Hashem treated, and he had to recuperate. And it was Sukkot's time, and he was in a wheelchair, couldn't do anything. So he asked the handyman in the place where he was recuperating in the Beit Havra'ah, he asked him to build a sukkah, and he gave him all the instructions, and he make a thatched roof with walls and this and that. Anyhow, comes Erev Sukkot, and he brings him out with the wheelchair, and he shows him his pièce de résistance, his incredible accomplishment. Look at the sukkah that I built. And the Zayda looks at the sukkah, and he doesn't know to laugh or to cry, because it had a steel roof. So he says to him, didn't I tell you to make it with thatched, psoilus garden v'yeka, branches and leaves? He says, Rabbi, branches and leaves, what if it rains? What if it rains? You go into a sukkah that is not so stable, and you can't be too confident with what you did, because we put our trust in Hashem. That's what the sukkah represents. Sila de Mehem Nusa, the shade of Emunah. I spoke about Emunah before. It's the shade of Emunah. So we go one step further. We are nothing. We are the Arava, and we've put ourselves on the ground. We are completely at your mercy, Hashem. We have no prowess, we have no intelligence, we have no politics, we have no, ace in our pocket that we can pull out at the end and win the card game. No, we don't have anything. We don't have millions. We're paupers. We're helpless. All the way on the ground, with the face buried, the lips. Now, the significance of the lips is really very important. Because if you think about it, from Rosh Hoshana until Yom Kippur, every single moment of Yom Kippur is lips and more lips. Words pour, cascade, inundate. It's all words, especially when there's no Beis HaMikdash anymore. All we are left with is words. And to signal how important words are, we say Kol Nidre at the beginning. If we had any words that were abrogated, that were violated, we undo things. We try to make amends. We fix things because we want our words to be important. And everything is words of the lip. And it's not lip service. It's the service of the lips. It's very genuine. It's very real. We are very authentic. But still, there's a very big problem here. It sounds very strange. Jews are looking for problems where they don't exist. But there's a problem here, because there's a part of us that says that we accomplished something. We did it. Our lips were successful. We believe in the kapara of Yom Kippur. We say to the Ribbon Shalom by Ne'ilah, we don't even say anymore, Al Chet Shefatanu L'Fanacha. Did you notice that? The whole thing is abrogated. It's shortened. It's crunched up. There's not much there. Hashamnu Bagadnu finished. Why not Al Chet? We're pretty confident that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the kapara. Slach lanu, machal lanu, kapar lanu. We got it. We achieved it. We did it. Didon notzach. We made it. The averas, maybe they even turned into positives. Zedainis nasan loy kizachuyas. Comes Hoshana Rabbah, a miniature Yom Kippur, in many ways. And you know what happens? We say to Ribbon Shalom, we don't have any lips. We give up those lips. We are not with words anymore. It's a silent act of beating the Arava on the ground. Yitain Offer pihu ula yesh tikva. Maybe there's hope. Maybe there's hope. We're not sure. Ula yesh tikva. We don't have that confidence because we don't have the bravado. We don't have the security. We are kaveh el Hashem. Chazak v'yamitz libecha v'kaveh el Hashem. It's the kind of confidence that is lacking confidence. It's the kind of hope that yearns for more hope. We don't have any guarantees. Not at that moment of Hoshana Rabbah. Very fascinating. Very, very fascinating. And really, the notion of humility in Yiddishkeit is so essential. It's so critical. And you know what you find? You find that the greatest tzaddikim, the biggest Talmidei Chachamim, were the most humble in all of history. You know, people like me, I have no problem being humble, in my Torah learning especially. No problem. You know why? Recently, I got, somebody sent me an article about an individual that maybe you never even heard of. You know about Rabbi Kiva and you know about the Chazon Ish. You know about Chacham Ovadia Yosef and you know about Rabbi Yashiv. Yibodel Chaim Toivim Baruchim, you know about Reb Chaim Kanievsky. But did you ever hear of a person, Zichrona Livracha, by the name of Reb Shlomo Schuster? I doubt it. Who was this Reb Shlomo Schuster? I don't mean where was he born. He's a person that basically passed away in our time. He's a contemporary in a sense, not so long ago. Reb Shlomo Schuster was born with an absolutely photographic memory. At the age of 6, he started learning Gemara. 6, started learning Gemara, whereupon he memorized tractate after tractate. You'd press his nose, so to speak, and out would come one page after another, verbatim, but literally verbatim. Well, sometimes you have a person who's called an idiot savant. It's a person that can memorize, lists of thousands of numbers, and, you have people like that. But, they can't think, they can't process, they can't argue, they can't comment. But this genius was a genius in every possible way. Brilliant as can be. Wrote thousands of pages. I don't know if anyone even knows where they are. It's very interesting. I read a footnote in that he was a Menachem Ovel, someone, and there was an extraordinarily brilliant Talmid Chacham by the name of Menachem Mendel Yosef Zaks, the son-in-law of the Chafetz Chaim. And they got to talking about the graves in Vilna, the graves in the cemetery of Vilna. And Rabbi Zaks was discussing how certain graves were very close to one another. Okay? Whereupon Rav Schuster immediately stated that the graves under discussion were 127 graves apart. And then he started to recite all the names of the rabbis buried between them. Rav Zaks immediately deferred to Rabbi Schuster. But this Rabbi Schuster, he did not have an easy life, did not have a pleasant life. And he more or less went recognized and yet completely not recognized. Very remarkable. But he was, for a certain time in Yeshiva Torah V'das, and to supplement his very meager income, there were times that he didn't have food in his refrigerator. I don't even know how that's possible. Such a brilliant Talmid Chacham, such a tzaddik. How was he so abandoned? And he had to supplement his income, his meager income. He would recite Kaddish for people. in the constant minyanim that were in the yeshiva, again and again, he would say Kaddish. But he also said Kaddish for the Gedolei Yisrael of the past. And he would announce from 9 to 9:15, because today is the yard site of the Maria Barceloni, a very great Goin of the time between the Goinim and the Rishonim. I will learn all the machlokesim between 9 and 9:15. I will learn in their memory, in the memory of the Ria Barceloni, all of the arguments, all of the disputes in halacha between the Ria Barceloni and the Rabbah. For the next 10 minutes afterwards, I will learn all of the disputes between him and the Ravid. And afterwards, all the disputes between him and the Rashba, and so on and so forth. Do you know what kind of a brain it takes to collate and collect all of this without the use of a computer? I mean, I don't know if I would be able to do that at all from memory. And certainly if I had the Svarim in front of me and I was given the opportunity to research, maybe I could do it in a year's time. And this was all coming out of him instantaneously. And on and on and on. I don't have to compare myself to the Vilna Gaon or to the greats that were just universally recognized who just passed away. I don't have to compare myself to Rabbi Akiva Eiger. I know my place. I know who I am. I know how limited my brain is. I know how limited my capacity is. It's not a problem. But the giants of Torah, who really had these incredible minds and unbelievable otzros, treasures of knowledge, at their beck and call, at their fingertips, on their fingertips. Their humility was unbelievable, unbelievable. You know, they tell a story. Rabbi Yonason Eibshitz once came to a community, and they were saying vidui, and he hears a certain yid crying bitter tears, and he's saying, Elokai ad shaloi noitzarti eini kedai. Before I was created, before I was born, I wasn't worth anything. V'achshav shenoitzarti kilu loi noitzarti, and ofrani b'chayei, I'm like the dust in my lifetime. I am before you like a vessel that is full of embarrassment and he was so impressed by this person's complete and total self-effacement, his complete and total erasure of his ani, and he was just overwhelmed. It gave him a hero tshuva. Anyhow, Shabbos comes Shabbos Shuva, and he's in the or the Shabbos after Yom Kippur. I don't know which day it was, but there's a laning, and this man is called up for an aliyah, and he's called up for Revi, the fourth aliyah. And all of a sudden he says, "You're giving me the fourth aliyah, and him you gave shlishi? How could that be? What were you thinking? How could you give him such a prominent aliyah and me you give this Revi?" And he's making such a stink. So Rabbi Yonason Eibshitz, he can't fathom what's going on. Here's this person that yesterday was erasing himself completely, that he's totally nothing. And now all of a sudden, what are you doing to me? How dare you treat me like this? How does that get reconciled in the same person? He was wondering. So he asked the fellow, says to him, "My dear friend, yesterday I heard you, and now you're worried about your aliyah, that they're not giving you the proper respect, the proper kavod." He says, "What is there to be not to understand? Yesterday I was talking to God. When I'm talking to Hashem, of course I'm nothing. But now I'm dealing with people. People? Of course I'm a somebody." That's what he answered. With people, I'm a somebody. Said Rabbi Yonason Eibshitz, a beautiful word. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he said we are nothing, what are we? What was the context? To whom and with whom was he when he made that statement. V'nachnu ma. It was with Korach and his henchmen. Korach va'adasa. It says, even legabe people, Moshe Rabbeinu said that he and Aharon are nothing. And that's how he explained what it means in the Gemara when Chazal tell us that greater is it what Moshe said, v'nachnu ma, than what Avraham Avinu said in his humility, v'anochi ofar va'efer. So normally we learn that ofar va'efer still has some value, and nachnu ma means we are zero. But Rabbi Yonasan Eibishter says, besides that, there's something else. To whom was Avraham Avinu talking when he said, I am just like ofar va'efer, I'm like dust and ashes? He was talking to Hashem. Whereas to whom was Moshe Rabbeinu talking when he said, we are nothing? He was talking to other people, to much lesser people. So that's the madrega, we are nothing. You all know that Rabbi Akiva Eiger was like the giant of giants. It is impossible to explain the brain of Rabbi Akiva Eiger. The genius of Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Rabbi Akiva Eiger's humility even surpassed his genius. It even surpassed his genius. Somebody suggested a shidduch, the daughter of Rabbi Akiva Eiger, to the Chassam Sofer. He did marry her in the end. So Rabbi Akiva Eiger was asked to describe his daughter. I mean, he wants to know who she is. So he gave her all kinds of accolades about how wonderful she is, what a tzaddikas she is, what a tznuah she is, and on. He says, the only thing I have to admit is that there's one thing you won't get. You won't get a bas Talmid Chacham. He sent it back to the Chassam Sofer, who responded, I appreciate very much the milas of the Kala, and I'm very interested in the shidduch, but I want you to know that you're not marrying off your daughter to a Talmid Chacham. So apparently their level of understanding of what a Talmid Chacham is far beyond us, like outer space. But this was Rabbi Akiva Eiger. And it's very well known, his humility was just unbelievable. They tell a story about Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and this is an incredible story. They tell a story about Rabbi Akiva Eiger and the Rav of Lisa, the Nesivos, Rabbi Yankov Milisa. The Baal HaNesivos was also a tremendous genius, wrote many svarim and just all the Miktzayos HaTorah. And they once came to a certain town. Now he was the Rav of Lisa, Rabbi Akiva Eiger was the Rav of Posen. And the Rabbi called up to the third Aliyah, Shlishi, he called up Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Rabbi Akiva Eiger stood up and fainted on the spot. Everybody got hysterical. Who knows what happened to him? Maybe he had a heart attack, maybe he had an aneurysm, or this or that, or whatever. They didn't know anything in those days anyhow. And they started looking for doctors and for this and for that. The Nesivos, he says, I know what the problem is. He went over to Rabbi Akiva Eiger, who was lying there in a faint, and he whispered something into his ear, and all of a sudden Rabbi Akiva Eiger was all right. He got better, instantaneously. So they asked him, what is it? So he says, if you understood why he fainted, you'd understand how I got him out of it. When he heard that he's getting the Aliyah and not the great Gaon, Talmid Chacham, Rabbi Yankov of the city of Lisa, the Rav of Lisa, the Baal HaNesivos, and maybe 50 other Svarim, he just was so besides himself that he passed out. He passed out from Agmas Nefesh, from distress. How could you call me for Shlishi before you called the Rav of Lisa? So how did he get him out of it? The Rav of Lisa bent down and he said, you know why? It's not because you're greater than me. It's because your city is bigger than mine. Ah, just the city that's bigger. But Akiva Eiger is okay with that. Akiva Eiger's humility, just unbelievable. Just this There's nothing like it. That's because in the end, the Kavel Hashem Chazak V'Ametz Lebecho, it's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who gave him that mind, and did he use it properly, and did he use it according to his capacity. They told the Chazon Ish, is there anybody that he thinks is even, no, this is how it goes. They asked the Chazon Ish, is it or is it not true that you are the Gadol Hador today? And the Chazon Ish says it's true. That doesn't sound like very, very much humility at all. So someone asked him, Chazon Ish, Rav Karelitz, doesn't that make you a Baal Gaiva? Isn't that vanity? He says, no. He says, according to the capabilities that Hashem granted me, I should have been much, much bigger. You don't know what they're contending with, what they measure themselves against. You don't understand how they perceive themselves on a plateau, on a level. That's the Arava. We all become the Arava, every one of us. People who have money, people who have power, some people have great success in business or great success in their careers. A person could be a great doctor, an extraordinarily successful and capable lawyer. And Hoshana Rabbah comes and says, just a moment. In the end, you peel away the esrog, and you peel away the lulav, and you peel away the hadas, and you're left with the arava. In the presence of Hashem, no one is really anything. And in the presence of greatness and the potential for a person's greatness and the capacity for a person to do great things, there are a lot of highways and byways that we didn't travel where we could have accomplished who knows what. And the things that we do could sometimes pale to insignificance compared to the things that we could have done or that we ought to do. And when you start thinking along those lines, the way I do all the time, there was a young fellow, he passed away in Corona, due to the Corona. But he was a Down syndrome young man in his 30s. And he would, quote unquote, lead the Simchas Torah celebration in our shul, which to him was so important that even though he spent the first days of Sukkot in Eretz Yisrael with his relatives, he insisted that for the last days of Sukkot, he has to be back in Rav Kahn's shul on East 18th and Avenue J, very much not in Eretz Yisrael. And he would come and he would lead with enthusiasm and excitement and try to say the words, Ein Nadir, and everybody was so motivated, they were so excited for him. They were so compassionate for him. And it was not a Rahmanis compassion, it was an enthusiasm compassion. And it really elevated the whole experience of Simchas Torah. Whole experience. And at one of his, nichumim, the various times that you have a chance to say a few words, I realized, and I said it beferish, that the distance intellectually and in terms of the knowledge of Torah between him and me is less than the distance between me and the Vilna Gaon. What is there to be vain about? What is there to be so excited about? What is it to say I have gained, I have accomplished, I have achieved, I have learned? And the Torah is so vast that even the Vilna Gaon had to admit that he left most of it behind. what are we really? Ma anu, ma anachnu, mechayenu, mechazdenu, matzidkenu, ma'ishchasenu. Halakol agiborim ka'ayin lefanecha ba'anshi Hashem keloi hoyu. V'chachomim kivli mado, nevoyim kivli askel. We say it every single day. But on the day of Hoshana Rabbah, we take the arava because the koach of a Jew is with his mouth. On a secular level and on a religious level. And koichai shel uma zu ela bapeh. And we speak and we speak and we express and express and we sing and we sing and we utter and we utter beautiful words, Torah words, religious words, tehillim, davening, tefillos, tishbachos, shiros, bakashos, everything. And then all of a sudden, we say, no, we are nothing. And we give up our lips and we put them in the ground. Yitain offer pihu ula yesh tikva. And suddenly from the triumph of LeDavid Hashem Ori V'Yishi comes the extraordinary, it verges on despair of who are we, what are we, and where is Hashem? And we beg Hashem to acknowledge and recognize us. And in the end, what's left? So what is the Sof Pasuk of LeDavid Hashem Ori V'Yishi? Kaveh el Hashem, trust in Hashem, have hope in Hashem, have faith in Hashem. Commit yourself to Hashem. Because even if you're the Arava, even if you are nothing, but with Hashem you are everything. With Hashem you are everything. And that, even if it's not enough, is a premise. Chazak v'yametz libecha, Kadosh Baruch Hu will strengthen you and give you courage, give you a mitzvahs halev. V'chavei el Hashem. V'kavei el Hashem. An extra level of emunah, an extra level of bitachon, an extra level of connection. And that, Rabbi say, is what I believe, the central and focal theme of a very long and very complicated day that starts out with a lot of davening and a lot of Yom Kippur in it, and a lot of nusach, and a lot of very beautiful things merged and blended, and nigla and nistar, Kabbalistic ideas, medrash ideas, rabbinic ideas, and all of a sudden it comes to a denouement, a final moment in the day when the davening is all over, the words have ceased. There's a voice, who knows where that voice is? It's not our voice, because our voice has been silenced. We silenced it. We've given away our lips. But the kol mevaser, there's a voice that is declaring, and it's declaring the most glorious future for Klal Yisrael. Because from there we go to Shmini Atzeres. And from Shmini Atzeres, we go to the Geula Shlema b'Meheira v'Yameinu. Amen v'Yamein. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jacob, for the opportunity. Thank you, Rabbi Babbage, for being so warm and friendly and kind to me. And Bezos Hashem Yisborach, we should be zeichet to have many more opportunities and maybe be Yerushalayim Ira Kodesh.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rav Kahn, for that truly moving, inspiring, and insightful presentation. So basically, the Rav is saying that the take-home message for all of us after these many weeks of davening and introspection is humility. That's the take-home message, and the beating of the Rabbah is, even though we celebrate the Rabbah on Hoshana Rabbah, the beating of the Rabbah is meant to suppress our overconfidence in our words. Is that correct? And
that's correct.
Beautiful. Now, is it safe to say that although the Rabbah may not have Torah or Ma'asim Tovim, that he does have Emunah, a very simple, basic Emunah, and that's really as what you...
I have to tell you something. This is a discussion that's for another hour, really, but the Jew on the highest level never, ever look down upon the Jew on the lowest level. And there's very much of, there but for the grace of God go I type of thing. You look at where the person is, where he's coming from, what he didn't have, and the opportunities that you had. And instead of looking down upon him, you ask yourself, well, if I was in his situation, would I even be there at all? And I think that's, I don't think there's any Rav that's worth his salt that looks out upon his congregation and doesn't love every single one of them. Each person, it works both ways. It works that, I'm not on the level that I can say I'm better than you. But it also works that I find in you, whoever that you is, tremendous worth. I have to tell you, do I have another minute? I gave a shiur to a certain congregation. Obviously, I'm not going to mention its name. But I gave a shiur to a certain congregation, and I was not particularly happy with some of the tznius in the community. And I basically told them that. It wasn't my kehillah, but they invited me to speak, and I always speak my mind. I'm never, lo saguru mipnei ish. And one of them got up, and without anger, without resentment, but he got up and he said, Rabbi, you have no right to speak to us like that. Just like that. And, I just was listening, at that point, what am I supposed to say? I believe I saw something. I thought people would correct it. Somebody would be inspired. I said my piece. He says, Rabbi, you have no right to talk to us like that. Then he told me the following. He said, when I got married, not long afterwards, my business took me to Japan with a number of others from my community. And I'm not going to tell you where they were those nights, but I can tell you where I was. I was in my hotel room, miserable, lonely, and alone, but I didn't go anywhere. You have no right to talk to me like that. And that was for me a tremendous lesson, tremendous lesson. Here's this person, and day to day leaves what to be desired, so to speak. But he's saying that what he gave up for Hashem in those very critical moments, because he had a wife at home and he had a responsibility to her and a responsibility to himself and a responsibility to Hashem. And it was excruciating. And the others didn't feel that way. They felt that, they could allow themselves some lapses. And he had to fight them too. Like Yoshua and the rest of the Meraglim, Yoshua and Kalev, against the rest of them. And he prevailed. And he felt that anybody that can do that, like this Kedusha there, you have to acknowledge it. And to me, this was a very important lesson. There are things that people are capable of, simple people, quote unquote, insignificant, the silent majority, insignificant people that boggle the mind. Everybody has extraordinary holy neshamas. And you never know when that opportunity will present that the neshamas can express themselves. So we have to be very, very careful about, we're not allowed to knock anybody, really. And there's tremendous ayid and kleinigkeit.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Rav Kahn. So the Rabbah, just by the fact that he shows up, demonstrates that he does have emunah. He has a...
You know that when we make the Misha Beirach, which we all say, Kol Misha Noisnim Ner Lamor, Yain L'Kiddush Shel Avdolah, yeah? But what else is there? Kol Misha Ba'im V'Socha L'Hispalel. So what's that? What's he doing? He's davening. It doesn't say he gave 5 cents to the shul. It doesn't say he gave Ner Lamor and Yain for Kiddush and Avdolah. So Ba'im V'Socha L'Hispalel, yeah. And then when you look at the word, I tell you something else. Even the people that don't come to daven have tremendous kedusha in them. Nobody ever taught them. Nobody gave them the chance. You see some people that when somebody reaches out to them and somehow manages to get across, they can become incredibly great. just a matter of, everybody has potential. Everybody has greatness.
Thank you so much, Rav Kahn. It was truly inspiring. We wish you a good yontif, and please God, may this Bez Hashem this year bring you a year of good health for you and your family,
Amen.
and continue to be Marbit's Torah, Rabbim, for many, many years to come. Ad Mea Ve'esrim.
Amen. And my warmest regards to everyone. Atzlocha Rabbah. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Tomorrow, Shachris is at 7:30, Hoshana Rabbah, and we wish you a good evening.